The Trunchbull was shouting. The word what is spelled W-H-A-T. Now spell it, you little wart. Eric didn't hesitate. He had learned from watching Rupert a few minutes before that the quicker you answered, the quicker you were released. W-H-A-T, he squealed. Spells what? Still holding him by his ears, the Trunchbull lowered him back into his chair behind his desk. Then she marched back to the front of the class, dusting off her hands one against the other like someone who had been handling something rather grimy. That's the way to make them learn, Miss Honey, she said. You take it from me. It's no good just telling them. You've got to hammer it into them. There's nothing like a little twisting and twiddling to encourage them to remember things. It concentrates their minds wonderfully. You could do them permanent damage, Miss Trunchbull, Miss Honey cried out. Oh, I have. I'm quite sure I have, the Trunchbull answered, grinning. Eric's ears will have stretched quite considerably in the last couple of minutes. They'll be much longer now than they were before. There's nothing wrong with that, Miss Honey. It'll give him an interesting pixie look for the rest of his life. But Miss Trunchbull, oh, do shush, Miss Honey. You're as wet as any of them. If you can't cope in here, then you can go and find a job in some cotton wool private school for rich brats. When you have been teaching for as long as I have, you'll realize that it's no good at all being kind to children. Read Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Honey, by Mr. Dickens. Read about Mr. Wackford Squeers, the admirable headmaster of the Doleful Boys' Hall. He knew how to handle the little brutes, didn't he? He knew how to use the birch, didn't he? He kept their backsides so warm you could have fried an egg and bacon on them. A fine book, too. But I don't suppose this bunch of morons we've got here will ever read it, because the looks of them, they're never going to learn how to read anything. I've read it, Matilda said quietly. The Trunchbull flicked her head round and looked carefully at the small girl with the dark hair and deep brown eyes sitting in the second row. What did you say? She asked sharply. I said I've read it, Miss Trunchbull. Read what? Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Trunchbull. You are lying to me, ma'am, the Trunchbull shouted, glaring at Matilda. I doubt there is a single child in the entire school who has read that book, and here you are, an unhatched shrimp, sitting in the lowest form there is, trying to tell me a whooping great lie like that. Why did you do it? You must take me for a fool. Do you take me for a fool, child? Well, Matilda said, then she hesitated. She would have liked to say, yes, I jolly well do, but that would have been a bad idea. Well, she said, again, still hesitating, still refusing to say no. The Trunchbull sensed what the child was thinking, and she didn't like it. Stand up when you speak to me, she snapped. What is your name? Matilda stood up and said, My name is Matilda Wormwood, Miss Trunchbull. Wormwood, is it? The Trunchbull said. In that case, you must be the daughter of that man who owns Wormwood Motors. Yes, Miss Trunchbull. He's a crook, the Trunchbull shouted. A week ago, he sold me a second-hand car that he said was almost new. I thought he was a splendid fellow then, but this morning, while I was driving the car through the village, the entire engine fell out onto the road. The whole thing was filled with sawdust. The man's a thief and a robber, all of it. His skin for sausages. You see if I don't. He's clever at his business, Matilda said. Clever my foot, the Trunchbull shouted. Miss Honey tells me that you are meant to be clever too. Well, ma'am, I don't like clever people. They're all crooked. You are most certainly crooked. Before I fell out with your father, he told me some very nasty stories about the way you behaved at home. But you better not try anything in this school, young lady. I shall be keeping a very careful eye on you from now on. Sit down and keep quiet.